this is in Acts. There it is. Let's look at it so you have a verse. Oh, my Bible's falling apart. But my life's not. Okay. Let's start with 21. After the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have..." This is the worst I told you so ever, okay? Worst I told you so ever. They're still in the 14-day hurricane. Paul stands up, and the first time he addresses it, he goes, "Hey guys, I told you so. I told you we shouldn't have sailed. I told you it's going to cost you a lot. I told you you're going to lose your cargo. I told you so." But he goes on to say this. He said, "You should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourself this damage and loss. But now I urge you, keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed." Now, the reason I love this story of this message is that haunted me for several weeks, going, why? Why, if nobody's going to die, does the ship need to be destroyed? Why does God send you in a hurricane if He's told you you're supposed to go to Rome? Why does God let you struggle and fight and think you're going to die to the point that you have lost all courage? And then when He says, "You know what, I'm still going to save you, but the ship's going down." Last night an angel of the Lord, whose I am and who I serve, stood beside me. So this is our third encounter with God. And said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar." Oh, okay. Confirmation. Good. I didn't misunderstand you the first time you stood before me in jail, but you're still standing before me in a storm. You're still standing before me in a hurricane. Is this really necessary, God? I mean, really, I would have followed you if you just said, "Hey, could you go to Rome sometime on your vacation and tell the people about me?" That's what we would want, right? But where do we get to meet God? It's in the prison. It's in the storm. It's in the chaos. It's in the struggle that God is most clearly seen by us. So He sends us through all that. He needed 7 years to take David from being a shepherd to being a king. He didn't know how to be king. He was a warrior. He could fight, but he didn't know how to be king. He didn't know how to lead men. He didn't know how to live honorably in a way that everybody else could see how honorable he was to God. And they needed to be able to see it so they would follow him when the time came. And it took 7 years. Why does Paul have to go through this storm on his way to Rome? Couldn't they have just sent him? And God just said, "I'm going to send you first class, Paul, because I love you." But He doesn't. Let me go on and read this, and I'll tell you the so what. And we'll go on. "Do not be afraid, you must stand trial before Caesar. God has graciously given me the lives of all who sail with you." God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. "Keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God, and it will happen just as He told me." Ah, there it is again, positive. "But nevertheless, the ship must be destroyed and run aground on some island." It's a both and. I believe in God. It will happen as He said. But you need to understand His ways are not my ways. His thoughts are not my thoughts. And He's let me know that yes, it's going to happen. But we're still going to run aground. We're still going to be in the storm. And by the way, your entire ship is still going to be destroyed. But trust. Because God's given me the lives. Now here's what I learned years ago when I looked at this. In this process. I used to feel like I could hear God's voice fairly clearly in ways, and I'd go, "Cool, God, that's what you want to do, I'll do it." And I would run ahead, and I would do it on my own strength and my own power. And it would fail every single time. Until I learned God cared a whole lot more about the people around me than I did. I cared whether the task got completed. I cared whether I did what God called me to do, because that was my focus. But what I learned was God didn't just have to get me on task. He needed to get a person I didn't even know yet on task. He needed to get somebody that wasn't even living in my city yet to move to my city to accomplish what he was going to accomplish. He needed to get a wife in my life so that I could lead in ministry the way I'm supposed to lead in ministry, with some compassion versus just committed legalism, which I was pretty good at. He needed to get a church that had gone through struggle to trust again. He needed to get not only young people to catch a vision, but old people to dream dreams again. He needed to get, and what I began to learn was, God, when you have a call on my life, it's never just about my life. If it were, this would be all I needed. But it's about what you are doing in your kingdom. Therefore, my life is just simply available in service to you as you put together everything else necessary for you to accomplish what you're trying to do in my life. Does that make sense? And it takes both. So why does the ship have to be destroyed? We find out at the end. Why does Paul have to go through a hurricane? We find out at the end. Why does he have to face all this struggle and this hardship? We find out at the end. And ultimately it is this. The hurricane was necessary because God wanted to get the gospel to somewhere besides just Rome. That wasn't even on Paul's radar. Not only do I believe he wanted to get the gospel to centurions who were in prison with him, tied to him, and we know sometimes they began to be followers of Christ simply because of his testimony for him and Silas. He wanted to get the gospel to leaders in authority over several different government rulers and things. Agrippa, Festus, and Felix all got to hear Paul's testimony. He not only wants to share it with the guy who's with him, but there are 273 lives on this ship. This is not a small boat. And he is being a witness and a testimony to all 273 people that this God that I serve is trustworthy. That this God that I serve is faithful. I just need you to trust him, even to the point that you're going to cut that lifeboat away. That one thing that you think can save you, I'm going to need you to get rid of, because something else is greater than it, and it will bring salvation to your life if you'll just believe. Not only that, Paul didn't have Malta, which is the island they crashed into, even on his radar. But God did. God wanted to take the gospel to Malta. So God used Paul in a hurricane and 273 other people to begin to bring that gospel. And now it's not just Paul. It's all these people saying the same testimony. Man, when Paul said God would save us, he did. When Paul said this would happen, it did. Now what's weird about that, when he gets to Malta, God so wants to get the gospel to Malta. In fact, there's another king and a chief and a leader involved in this process. So there's 4 key leaders that when they put a fire together for them on the beach, it's still raining, the hurricane is still going, they're cold and they're wet because they just came ashore. It says a viper jumps out and bites Paul on the arm and latches himself to his arm. And literally Paul then takes the viper and shakes it off into the fire. But because of the viper, the people of Malta think, oh, he's getting his just desserts. Paul must really be a murderer. He wasn't supposed to escape the sea. That's why the hurricane was happening, because Paul was a murderer and he should have died, and God was trying to kill him in the sea, but he escaped that. So now God's still going to get him with this serpent. Now the crazy thing is, after the serpent bites him and he shakes it off, it says they wait for a long time. They're just kind of watching Paul to see what happens. Surely he's going to die. It says surely he's going to swell up. This is going to go bad, or he's going to fall over dead. But after a long time, they change their mind and decide he's not a murderer, he's God. He is a God because now he's survived this. But that is the open avenue God uses for him to say, no, I'm not God. But let me tell you about the God that I serve. God uses all of that. But again, then, why does the ship need to be destroyed? You asking that question still? Because I did for a long time. Why does the ship, if you're going to save them, and nobody's going to die, why does the ship have to be destroyed? In the last sentence it says this: when the ship struck the sandbar, it struck so hard it broke up. Is this the stern? Is that the front? No. Back? Front. Then the waves were strong enough that they began to break apart the stern as they're hitting it. Paul tells everybody, those of you who can swim, swim to shore. It says, and then everybody else who couldn't got to shore on the wreckage of the ship. The only way they were all getting to shore was for the ship to be destroyed in the midst of a storm that God was taking. Let God carry you through the storm. Let God do what he wants to do in your life, good and bad. You just seek him. Let God take you where he needs to take you. Let him challenge you where he needs to challenge you. Let him confuse you where he needs to confuse you. You just be faithful to witness and testify to the God that you serve. Dear Heavenly Father, as we come before you, Lord, again, would you be the interpreter of your word to your people? The story is so much bigger than we covered today. Because God, you are that. And ultimately we see that Paul does, after 3 months on this island, getting to witness and testify, not only to the king of the island, but to all the people who live there. He gets to go to Rome. And he gets to testify there. He never is free from the imprisonment completely. But he fulfills everything you call him to do. Father, would we not look only for the positive? Would we not look only for the good? That salvation. Would we not look only for freedom? Would we look simply to be obedient? To be faithful? Wherever you've placed us, in whatever situation, whatever culture, whatever family, whatever job, whatever grocery store, whatever school, would we just say, God, would you use me? Good or bad? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to be in Christ. That is my goal. I'm not looking for everything to work out. I'm not looking for everything to suck. I'm looking to be in you. I'm looking for you to be in me. And Father, if it takes prison, if it takes a storm, if it takes a breakup, if it takes a heartache, if it takes a death or a loss or a job change or a community change, do whatever you must do. That, Father, I get to know you more. That I get to experience you. So that when the time comes, when it is